Now we're going to have a video by Ari Kaplan. But before we play the video, we'd like to tell you who this Ari is, because many of you may be thinking, why didn't they get someone from New Brunswick? Someone from the Maritimes or Atlantic provinces? Well, I'll read this and you'll make your own mind why this gentleman is a key person for us. Excuse me. Ari Kaplan is a partner of Koski-Minsky in Toronto and is the author of Canada's acclaimed national textbook in the field of pension law and co-author of its second edition. Ari is top ranked amongst his peers in Canada and was selected as Lawyer of the Year in 2013. Ari represents employees, pensioners, and pension funds and has advocated on some of Canada's pension leading cases, including before the Supreme Court of Canada. Ari has appeared before the courts of half of Canada's provinces, including on New Brunswick's leading case on indexing rights, Quinn versus New Brunswick. If you remember well, the nurses appeared before the courts, the actives, and they wanted to represent the retirees, and Justice Grant indicated absolutely not. You need to get separate individual counsel, and this is where Ari Kaplan was brought in. Excuse me. Ari Kaplan was brought in, did his work, and was able to get a ruling from Justice Grant that it was illegal for the government to remove vested rights from pensioners. He won his case, but government naturally still implemented the shared risk. But we have the ability to go forward and with our legal challenge. If you give me a second, we'll now hear from Ari. Whoops. I just poked him.
Hi, my name is Ari Kaplan, and I'm a lawyer, and I've been retained by the Pension Coalition New Brunswick to represent pensioners and retirees in respect of the indexing on your public service pension plan. Last December, the legislature of the province of New Brunswick passed legislation called Bill 11. What Bill 11 did was convert your pension plan from a statutory guaranteed pension plan protected by the consolidated revenues of the province of New Brunswick into something called a shared risk plan. The most significant distinction between your old plan and the new plan is that under the old plan, you were guaranteed cost of living indexing increases every year after you've retired. Under the new model, that indexing is not guaranteed. It's called conditional indexing. That's a major change to your pension benefits. People who have worked for 20, 30, even 40 years in some cases had an expectation that every year that you worked, you would be entitled to a cost of living increase at the appropriate time when you retired. The conditional nature of the new shared risk plan puts that at risk. I believe that the government did not have the legal authority to pass legislation to unilaterally take away your guaranteed indexing. All legislation that's passed by any government in any legislature in the province is not unfettered. All legislation has to conform to what we call the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And what that says is that government cannot unilaterally discriminate against certain demographics in society without just cause. In this case, we say the government did not have just cause to change your vested benefits that you've earned through your work. The government has to comply with the rule of law in the workplace. And by passing legislation the way they did, they've done what no private employer in the country has the legal authority to do. The reason why the government is able to make this change and not a private employer is because the government has the power of the legislature behind it. It can implement legislation subject to the will of the people and subject also to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. From a legal perspective, if the government is going to be making the argument that it can't afford to pay you the indexing that you earned in your workplace, it has to look at all of the different revenues associated and expenditures associated with caring for you in your old age. Because a government is not just your employer, the government is your state. A government has a duty to balance its budget, but the government also has a duty to care for its people, particularly in older age. The problem I have is that Bill 11 is not implementing what was recommended in the government's own report. Specifically, the government said that benefit changes will only apply in the future. They said that each retiree will keep what he or she has already accrued under the plan pre-conversion. The government specifically says that vested amounts as well as indexation already granted to current retirees are retained. However, that's not what they've done in Bill 11. They've made all of the indexing that you've already earned conditional in the future. People who are retired have little advantage available to be able to replace the income lost by the lost indexing. Unlike a 30-year-old who still has 30 years plus of work ahead of him or her, somebody who's 70 has already been through that cycle. And that's what makes seniors different from every other employee in the plan and different from every other taxpayer. And that's why I believe that this legislation unjustifiably discriminates against seniors. You've already spent your years putting in your employment, paying for your pension, paying off the mortgage. And now at the end of the day, at the time in your life where you least have the ability to replace that income, you're being asked to take a gamble. And I believe in all of the circumstances that that does not run in conformity to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In conclusion then, 1. The government has passed Bill 11, which is legislation that eliminates your guaranteed indexing increases. 2. You have the legal right to challenge that decision, even though it's been made in legislation. 3. We're waiting for a decision of the Superintendent of Pensions in respect of the legal action that has already been started by the New Brunswick Pension Coalition. 4. After a decision comes out, there may be any one of a number of legal routes that we go to before we get to hear it before a judge. 5. Litigation is expensive and it takes some time. There's no guarantee this will be completed before the next provincial election in September. It may take a little while, but that should not discourage you from exercising your rights, because if you don't exercise them now, when? Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today about your pension indexing. I know this is stressful, and that's why we're making this video, to update and inform you as to what the New Brunswick Pension Coalition is doing for you from a legal perspective to help advance your rights. We will update you further as we have more information. Thank you very much.
All right, let's talk about what ARI is referring to in regards to indexation. Within your packages, you have this table, and one side is 30,000, the other side is 40,000. Vous avez ce document dans vos... OK, ce document indique clairement sur une période de 17 ans, de 1995 à 2012, l'indexation qui a été reçue. Disons, utilisant un exemple, une base de 30 000 $, et qu'est-ce que ça représente sur une période de 17 ans au niveau de perte d'indexation. Okay, so basically what this demonstrates and why we're fighting the case is how much are you losing with indexation? Now, that's assuming that there's no indexation. Now, government has indicated, and I'll say it again, that at 75% chance that we will receive 75% of CPI, and I'll explain what I mean by CPI. 75% of CPI on an average over 20 years. But government's not prepared to guarantee it. even though government is saying it could be as high as 85% chance that you'll get your 75% of CPI. There's a possibility of getting 0, possibility of getting 30% of CPI. But the possibility of 0 is real. And we want every one of you to understand the impact of what indexation means and your purchasing power over a period of years. And let's take that 17-year period as an example. So the amount that you lose the first year is $660, and then you lose $1,119 if you don't get indexation. That's 0. That's the worst case scenario. But we need to show what the worst case scenario is also, because the possibility does exist. If government is not prepared to guarantee the 75%, are we going to get any indexation? There's a gentleman with PIPS. His name is Bernard Dussault. And please stand up, Bernard. Bernard Dussault is a former actuary for the Canada Pension Plan. No dummy. No dummy. He loves numbers, but no dummy. And Bernard Dussault clearly indicated at the press conference, the joint press conference, that in his evaluation, without having had the opportunity to see all of the documentation, which government would not provide him, that there's a great possibility that for 15 years we may not see indexation. So if a gentleman of that experience and that expertise and known that well and responsible for the CPP, which is functioning really well, sometimes I question what government says. Now, if you cumulatively add all of the income shortfalls over a 17-year period, assuming, again I'm saying, I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just indicating, assuming that you get no indexation, means that you will lose a total of $113,000 of indexation over a 17-year period. That is significant. I know it is for me. Certainly should be for you. What happens with the lack of indexation? Okay, I've got two buckets here. This is my revenues, and these are my expenses. I've got $30,000 coming in, and I've got $30,000 going out. Well, at least I'm not broke. Okay? But what happens if you lose your indexation? The bucket is bigger on expenses than your revenue, because your revenue remains the same at $30,000. If you get no indexation, costs keep going up. Now they talk about indexation according to CPI, Consumer Price Index, what the basket is made of. Well, there's a gentleman that got up in one of our meetings and was furious about the basket. Clearly, he indicated what makes up that basket doesn't really reflect what my expenses are. It doesn't include gas, doesn't include taxes, doesn't include certain foods. Well, what does it include? So when gas goes up, and it goes up by 3, 4, 5%, where's indexation of 0.96 going to take you? Now we're going to move to the political strategy. Au niveau de la stratégie politique, les actions à ce jour, nous avons eu à l'Assemblée législative une période du mois de... Lorsque la Chambre a ouvert, jusqu'à lorsque le projet de loi a été accepté, projet de loi numéro 11, nous étions en Chambre presque tous les jours. Et les enseignants à la retraite et enseignantes à la retraite ont participé avec nous. Il y a eu les manifestations et la manifestation était exceptionnelle à Fredericton au mois de novembre, devant l'Assemblée législative. Il y avait au-delà de 3000 personnes. Il y a eu des rencontres avec les partis politiques. Le conseil d'administration de la coalition qui vous représente a rencontré les différents partis politiques à plusieurs reprises. Il y a eu beaucoup de lettres, des courriels, des articles, des communiqués de presse. Many of you have written letters, articles. We've published them on our website. Emails that were sent to your MLAs, to ministers, to the Premier. And we've had numerous press releases. That's what we've done. Now, what are we going to do? Before the tour began, we met, the coalition itself developed a motion. And it's part of your package. And it's so important, I'm going to read it. That motion was brought before each political party. And it reads as follows. Pension Coalition NB moves that your party, whichever, will support pension changes that deal with the pension needs of all New Brunswick citizens, not only public servants, in an open and transparent approach, and ensure contractual obligations to all former employees are honored as the Supreme Court of Canada has reaffirmed that pensions are actually deferred salary and owed to the employees, and work with both public and private sectors using an inclusive, consultative approach on the need for and direction of all pensions to ensure pension benefits for future and past employees are secure and protected, and re-examine the imposition of shared risk on the other employee groups, in particular the former members and pensioners of the PSSA, where a minority of bargaining employees who were members of the PSSA agreed to bind the more than 30,000, it's actually 32, covered by its terms. What that clearly means is that there are 4 unions that have signed on, totaling 4,500 members approximately, where the union members themselves did not have a right to vote. The union leadership made the decision to go forward with the shared risk pension plan. And there's 13,000 retirees. There's 8,000 non-bargaining employees that are active. And there's 12,000 unionized active. That makes 32,000. And out of that 32,000, 4,500 have basically decided what our fate is going to be for the future. Not fair. That is not representative. And the final one is ensure the investment of all public pension funds remain with the New Brunswick Investment Management Corporation with a clear competency-based criteria for appointment. And that organization has functioned extremely well for a 17-year period. And we've indicated before, but I'll say it again. The actuarial requirement is for NBIMC, New Brunswick Investment Management Corporation, to perform real return of 4% annually. They have performed at 4.75% as an average over 17 years. So we don't want ever, even though it's only a 5-year contract that they now have in possession, we don't want to lose NBIMC. We support them and we want them to remain in New Brunswick. We want our fund to be managed in New Brunswick by New Brunswickers. As I indicated, the motion was provided to all political parties. As far as the Liberal Party is concerned, there was a policy convention that was held April 26th, I believe, and it was held here in Fredericton. The coalition was present and moved a motion on the floor, and so did one of their MLAs, Roger Melançon, moved a motion on the floor in support of us, retirees, in regards to honoring our contracts. That's a key indication that we want all parties to go forward and support us, retirees. We are vulnerable, we are seniors, and we don't have the ability to go out and get additional compensation or income to make up for the loss of indexation. The NDP and the Green Party and the People's Alliance were also very supportive. Now, what we want is from the Liberal Party and the other parties, because we haven't seen platforms. Policy convention is one thing, platform is another. And what we want to see in the political platforms is that our motion be accepted and that the government, the next government that is formed, excuse me, the next government that is formed will honor our contracts and will begin the process over again. We want to develop or create a map of all the ridings and the candidates. That's a lot of work, but it's worth it. And we want to assign our regional contacts. Throughout the regions of the province, there's 11 locations that we've gone to. Well, we have regional contacts that have their own network. So what we want is create this map of the ridings with the candidates from the various parties, and each regional contact and his or her network to start by going to the various political events that will be occurring between now and September 22nd, and put your case forward. It's great for us as a coalition to speak to you. You're sold. You need to sell the MLAs or the candidates. You need to ensure that the candidates understand the issues clearly. Maintenant, nous parlons de finances. À ce jour, nous avons amassé 90 000 $ pour les dépenses opérationnelles de la coalition. Et nous en avons dépensé 68 000 $ pour les 2 tournées régionales, des annonces, radio, journaux, le site web, des ordinateurs, des photocopies, les salles pour les rencontres, téléphone, poste, puis tous les équipements audiovisuels dans chacune des séances. Ça va faire un total de 33 séances d'information dans 1 an et 2 mois. In a year and 2 months, we will have done 33 information sessions in the province of New Brunswick in 3 tours. It costs money, and we need to indicate to you that I, along with all those that work on the coalition, are volunteers. None of us are paid. None of us take money from the coalition to pay our expenses to go out on the road, to travel to those 11 locations 3 times, to pay for gas, to pay for food, to pay for hotel. We pay it out of our own pockets. none of us are benefiting financially in any way, shape, or form from any of the contributions that you've provided to the coalition. In the bank, we now have $22,000. 90, 68, 22. Our chairperson of the Finance Committee indicated that in order to carry us operationally between now and December 2014, we need $45,000. So we have 22, we need 23. This tour needs to generate $23,000. From a legal action perspective, we require $200,000. À ce jour, nous avons amassé 60 000. To date, we have spent 30. And where we have spent it is, first of all, we needed legal advice back in August of last year. And that demanded a number of meetings by phone, a lot of emails and exchange of information, and the letter was submitted indicating that we do have a case to go forward. So based on that, we could proceed. Then in December, there was a letter that was sent to the Superintendent of Pensions. That cost money. And there was some research put behind it and numerous conference calls. So now we have $30,000 that have been spent so far on these activities. And our lawyer, we're lucky, he's not charging us the going rate of Toronto lawyers. He's charging us $4.75 an hour, and they're going at $600 and $800 an hour. So we believe that at least he's not trying to gouge us. In order for us to go forward with the legal case, we now need $140,000 from a legal fund. So, we have buckets. You remember what I said about the buckets, do you? It's not to throw up in, don't worry about it. Anyways, maybe some of you may, but anyway. What we are expecting is from every single person is $20 minimum. And that's for the operational expenses to take us to December to continue working on the case. Secondly, you have an envelope. You have an envelope with your package, and it has our return address on it. What we expect is that contributions between $100 and $150 a person in a check be put in to this envelope either this evening and handed over in the bucket, or sent by mail, or use PayPal on the website, and you can use your credit card to contribute your donations. So please help us, because we can't help you without this, and we cannot go forward with the legal case if we don't get the legal financing. Now, in regards to legal, we finish our tour on Thursday this week. So we will have done the provincial tour again, okay? As of Friday, we are going to be sending out email to all of the members. We have 4,000 registered members of the coalition. We have your name, in many cases your address, we have your email address, in many cases we have your telephone numbers. So what we want to do is a number of things. One is to go out with an email and try to remind people, this is what we have, this is what we need. Please contribute if you have not. If you have and you feel you can contribute more, please do so. Because if we don't have the funds, we cannot continue fighting this fight. But I believe strongly that people will be supportive, and you have been supportive to this point. So now we're going on a big legal fundraising campaign push, and we need your support. Excuse me, we need a mic.
Just to be clear, Cliff usually says this, but he forgot, so I'm going to start this. The envelopes are for legal only, okay? We can only return money to people if we don't use it, if we have your name and your address and a way to contact you. So we will, everyone that puts money in the legal envelope and gives us that identifying information, should we collect more than we need, or should we not have to go as far as we think we do, we will return proportionately to everyone what wasn't used. So if we use less than, and you gave, and 20% wasn't, you'll get 20% of what you donated back. The ones that goes in the bucket, the money going in the bucket, we've said how much we need for operational. The extra money that isn't used for operational will be put over into the legal fund. Because we do need operational money to do what we do, but we do need today the money for legal. So we will assure you that should there be more money in the bucket than we require, it will go into legal. But we really need the amounts in the legal money, and we need your name and address so we can return to you if we don't use it. Sorry about that.
Thanks. Okay, thank you very much, Bonnie, because I do tend to forget certain things. I'm a senior. I have the right. I have the right. Okay, we're going to move to our question and answer period, but to begin the question and answer period, we have invited Vice President from PIPS to come forward and say a few words, Mr. Steve Hindle. So please, would you come forward and say a few words?
I'm going to. While Steve's coming, I'm going to give you a little bit of information on him and also on Bernard Dussault, who's here with us. Steve was elected VP of the Professional Institute of the Public Service in April the 29th. It's the largest union of public service professionals. It represents over 55,000 members from coast to coast, and it includes federal and provincial public service professionals in the province of New Brunswick. He is a longtime union activist who previously served as the national president from 96 to 2004. And in his career, he held a number of positions in Revenue Canada, the Canada School of Public Service, the Canadian Border Service Agency, and the Correctional Service Canada. And he also was a member of the Federal Public Service Pension Advisory Committee for 9 years. So he's got a lot of background and he's a lot of expertise. Bernard Dussault, who stood up at the start. Okay. Bernard Dussault currently advises the Professional Institute of Public Service of Canada on pension and benefit issues. And what was mentioned, from 92 to 98, he was the chief actuary for the Canada Pension Plan, the Old Age Security Program, and the 5 main federal public sector pension plans. And in that, he was involved in the 1998 CPP pension reform, which led to the 9.9% steady state contribution that is going on a go-forward basis. So we've got Bernard has helped us as a coalition, as an actuary, and provided advice to us, and we've appreciated that, and PIP's been very supportive, and we're glad to have you here.
You're welcome.
But before you start, people are asking what do we do to for your checks. I think this is the, make your check out to the NB Pension Coalition. The address is on the envelope, but the address is shown here. The website and Facebook and phone numbers are there, but make it out to NB Pension Coalition. Thank you, Steve.
A wonderful start. I assume the water was available because it was just sitting back there. Thank you for the introduction, Bonnie, and I appreciate very much the Pension Coalition of New Brunswick's invitation to say a few words, and I am going to try and keep it short, and I'm going to try and leave enough time for Bernard to say a few words as well, because I understand the importance of hearing from somebody who actually has facts. What I'm here to tell you is the Institute's concerned on behalf of its members that the government acted without facts, without sharing facts. And I'll make an assumption. They had them. They didn't want to tell us what they were. They missed an opportunity. They missed the opportunity to invite us in to have a discussion about what they saw as problems. We don't doubt that the Public Service Superannuation Act in New Brunswick had problems. There were some difficulties. Changes needed to be made. But rather than bringing us in, trying to convince us, trying to put some pressure on us, they just said, this is broken. This is broken so much that we have to throw it away. They just tossed it. And then they said, but we have the solution. And here's the solution. Welcome to the Public Service Shared Risk Pension. But just a minute. What about having a discussion? What about talking about it? What about looking at options? What about maybe it is possible to save PSSA? Bernard tells me that, no, Steve, it really wasn't possible to save it. They needed to do something. But they needed to talk to people. They needed to discuss what's going to happen with those who are going to be affected. Retirees, actives. And I'm standing in front of you and I'm thinking, I'm actually both. Not an active or a retiree in New Brunswick, but I retired from the federal public service last year. I went back to work full-time 2 weeks ago on behalf of the members of the Institute. So we've got concerns about the approach. And the missed opportunity has put us in a position of wondering what's driving the government of New Brunswick. Well, if it was facts, then surely they would have shared them with us. They would have convinced us that this is why we're doing it. Having not shared the facts, we're left with the idea that it must be ideology. Whatever their ideology is driving them to change the way they provide for pensions for people who work for the citizens of New Brunswick. Why does ideology come into it? Shouldn't we be looking at something that's sustainable, something that's actually bearing some relationship to what people are going to need when they're retired, what they're able to afford while they're working to save for retirement? If it's just ideology, government is bad, public spending needs to come down, well, you're forcing us into a fight on ideology. We'd rather not fight. We'd rather have a discussion. But if you want to fight, well, unions are known for it at times. And I must admit, I walked in tonight and I thought, coming to one of the largest PIPS meetings I've ever been to. Nice signs. But I know you're not all PIPS members, although I could bring you some registration cards. Okay, it's not a recruiting drive. We're driven by ideology. We need to protect our members. We need to represent them. We're going to do that. And we're going to do that to the best of our ability. We're willing to explore options with this government, with the next government, with any government. We're looking at all our options in terms of how to do this. Right now, we're not quite sure where that's going to be, but we are sure of one thing. We're sure that this government missed their best opportunity to bring us in as partners at the outset when they knew they had a problem. So that's the end of my political speech. I'm going to ask Bernard to come on up. He's got a few facts because he knows his numbers he wants to talk to you about, and then we'll get on with the questions and answers. And Clifford, I'm understanding I'm supposed to stay here in case they have a question for me. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for inviting Pips to say a few words here. I'm here as a number cruncher, and I don't understand everything, but I think I understand that you don't want to hear about number crunching, so I'll try to stay away from that. Like Steve said, the plan really needed to be healed. It had some problems, the main one being that the costs were too high, mainly because of the population aging and the fact that the plan itself, with all its provisions, was getting too expensive. So 3 main changes were brought through the shared risk plan. The first one is increasing the entitlement age from 60 to 65. That's a medication. It hurts, but it's got to be done, and it's a good medication. It's relevant. The second one is changing the average salary formula from best 5 years to carrier average. This hurts a lot too, but it's relevant. And both of these provisions reduce the cost. There's a third one, conditional indexation. Maybe I never said that before. You know what? That does not reduce the cost at all. It just helps the government. It heals the government. It does not heal the plan, because the liabilities will be reduced by $1 billion. This is to help the government, not to help their plan. So conditional indexation should not be one of the medication to this plan. So this is the main thing I had to say. The other one is that when I said that there would be no indexation for the next 15 years, the Minister of Finance was very disappointed. He said that's not right, but I just said that on the basis of the information we got, and we don't have all the information. For example, they work in the black box to a large extent. One of the provisions of the SRP is that costs will be shared 50-50. So when I was sitting with André on the task force, I asked, could we know what the cost is? You know what we were told? It's not relevant. So the box is really black. Okay, so I will stop here. Thanks for listening, and congratulations for the wonderful campaign of the coalition. I hope eventually we will have good resolutions. Thank you.
Okay, we will open for Qs and As, or for some comments, and I'll recognize by Mike's Cliff is here. Should you want to pose the question in French, I for sure can understand it, but he will probably respond better. Mike number 3, Jean-Charles.
Yes, there's just a couple of things that I would like to say that I feel has to be said. In the future, you have to realize that in order to get a fraction of your COLA or indexation, the fund has to be funded at a minimum of 105%.